World War II. Deep beneath the North Sea, Nazi Germany's submarine U-206 lay hidden. Below it stretched the terrifying depths of the ocean. Above it, British aircraft relentlessly patrolled the skies. Then, in a single moment, the submarine's captain made a fatal mistake while using the toilet. He opened the wrong valve. Within seconds, seawater surged into the vessel, flooding the battery compartment and triggering a deadly chlorine gas leak. With no other choice, the crew was forced to bring the submarine to the surface, right into the watchful eyes of the British Royal Navy and Royal Air Force. The moment they surfaced, the submarine was attacked, destroyed, and every crew member was taken prisoner. 200 meters beneath the surface, there is absolutely no room for error aboard a submarine. Even the smallest mistake can become a death sentence. They say a submariner's greatest enemy isn't the opposing force, it's his own mind. His entire world is nothing more than a steel tube moving silently hundreds of meters beneath the sea. Above him rests the crushing weight of the ocean. Below him, the silence of death. And in between, humanity. The crew members living inside don't spend days underwater. They spend months. In 2024, HMS Vanguard set a new record by remaining submerged for an astonishing 201 days. But that raises an important question. How do submariners survive more than 7 months beneath the ocean's surface? How do they overcome shortages of food, water, and, most importantly, oxygen? What happens to human waste and everything else that must be disposed of deep underwater? And if something goes terribly wrong, just as it did aboard U-1206, what options do they actually have? Welcome back to another video from Nova Reports. Many people imagine a submarine as some kind of luxurious vessel, fully equipped with every modern comfort imaginable. But in reality, being completely cut off from the rest of the world deep beneath the ocean is an enormous challenge, even if you're staying in what looks like a 5-star suite. The truth is, a submarine is closer to a coffin than a luxury vessel. It's essentially a narrow steel tube built for one purpose: to remain hidden while moving silently through the depths of the ocean. Inside, the space is so cramped that 2 people can barely squeeze past each other. We're talking about modern naval submarines, which may appear enormous from the outside. Yet inside that same vessel, you have massive engines, supplies for months at sea, and, astonishingly, room for more than 130 crew members. For comparison, a prisoner in a standard prison cell typically has around 80 square feet of personal space. A submariner, on the other hand, has barely 20 square feet. So saying that submariners don't go on missions, but instead serve 6 or 7 months inside a floating prison, wouldn't be much of an exaggeration. Privacy simply doesn't exist. Your personal space extends no farther than your shoulders. At every moment, someone is brushing against someone else. And that's where the first major challenge begins: claustrophobia. It's a condition in which confined spaces trigger intense fear. Panic attacks become common, heart rates spike, clear thinking becomes difficult, and the decisions made under those conditions are often the wrong ones. That's why naval selection programs closely evaluate every candidate for signs of claustrophobia. Even the slightest indication can be enough for immediate rejection. The very first challenge of submarine life is sleep. If you have your own private bed, consider yourself incredibly fortunate. Because aboard a submarine, private beds simply don't exist. The bunks are as tight as coffins, stacked one above another, leaving just enough room for a person to lie down. Sitting upright isn't even possible. Lying in one of these bunks feels remarkably similar to sleeping inside a grave. Submarines like the USS Missouri carry around 135 crew members, but only 94 bunks. That means every bed has to be shared. The system is known as hot bunking. The moment one sailor gets up for duty, another sailor finishes his shift and climbs into that same still warm bed. The bunk never has a chance to cool down. Even your sleep isn't really your own. It's simply another part of the shift rotation. Aboard a submarine, There is no such thing as day or night. Hundreds of meters beneath the ocean, sunlight never reaches the vessel. As a result, the human sleep cycle becomes completely detached from its natural rhythm. Everyone has to rely on an artificially controlled schedule instead. Now you're probably wondering, if so many people remain sealed inside the same submarine for months, where does all their food come from? When a submarine heads out on a mission, it leaves port carrying as much as 20,000 kilograms of food. But what's even more surprising is that there isn't a dedicated storage room for all those supplies. Instead, food is packed throughout the entire submarine. It's stored beneath bunks, stacked along passageways, and crammed into every available space. Crew members literally spend their days walking over boxes of food during the first few days. Fresh fruits, vegetables, and dairy products are available. Those have to be consumed within the first few weeks. After that, the entire crew relies almost exclusively on canned and frozen food. Yet, despite the limited space, food aboard a submarine is considered one of its highest priorities. Because hundreds of meters beneath the ocean, a good meal is one of the few things capable of keeping the crew's morale alive. If the food becomes repetitive and uninspiring, depression can quickly begin to set in. That's why some submarines assigned to long missions are even equipped with ice cream machines. Some crews also enjoy occasional steak nights. There are fully equipped galleys and trained chefs on board. However, to minimize the risk of accidents, every meal is prepared using electric stoves and ovens. And perhaps the most surprising detail of all, most people eat 3 meals a day. Submariners eat 4: breakfast, lunch, dinner. And finally, mid-rats. This extra meal is served shortly after midnight. The reason is simple. Life inside a submarine is incredibly stressful. Because of that constant stress, crew members burn significantly more calories than the average person. An extra meal helps prevent fatigue and keeps everyone functioning at their best. It also provides essential energy for the sailors assigned to overnight watch, making mid-rats the only meal available during their shift. Now we come to perhaps the most astonishing part of submarine life: oxygen. Hundreds of meters beneath the ocean's surface, there are no windows to open for fresh air. A submarine is literally a sealed steel tube, so where does fresh oxygen come from? Keeping enough oxygen cylinders on board for months would also be extremely dangerous. Since oxygen is highly flammable, that's why submarines rely on an advanced electrolysis system. Seawater is split into its chemical components. The oxygen is separated and released into the submarine's atmosphere, while the remaining hydrogen gas is safely vented away. An average person consumes around 600 liters of oxygen every day. On a submarine carrying 130 crew members, that means the onboard system must produce approximately 78,000 liters of oxygen every single day. In many ways, it's remarkably similar to the life support system aboard an underwater space station. If that system were to fail, the crew would begin feeling the effects of oxygen deprivation within minutes. But producing oxygen alone isn't enough to keep everyone alive. Every breath a human takes also releases carbon dioxide. So, while oxygen is constantly being produced and consumed, carbon dioxide continues building up inside the submarine. If nothing removes it, the air quickly becomes dangerously unbalanced. Once carbon dioxide levels rise beyond 10%, the situation becomes extremely hazardous. That's why modern submarines are equipped with carbon dioxide scrubbers. The submarine's air is continuously circulated through a large processing tower, where a liquid chemical called amine is sprayed into the airflow. This chemical selectively absorbs carbon dioxide while allowing the oxygen to remain. But if that system ever fails, the crew has emergency backups. Throughout the submarine are canisters filled with soda lime or lithium hydroxide. As air passes through these canisters, the chemicals react with carbon dioxide, converting it into solid carbonates. However, this method is strictly reserved for emergencies. Once a canister becomes saturated, it turns into waste itself, and disposing of it creates yet another problem. Fresh water is just as essential aboard a submarine, whether it's cooking meals, taking showers, doing laundry, or simply drinking. Every drop matters. Yet the submarine is surrounded by nothing but salt water. That seawater must first be purified. It is either distilled by turning it into steam and condensing it back into fresh water, or filtered using reverse osmosis. Because nuclear submarines have virtually unlimited power, they typically rely on the distillation process. Modern submarines, meanwhile, often use advanced filtration systems that remove the salt directly from seawater to produce fresh drinking water. Even though fresh water can be produced on board, its use is still strictly controlled. No one gets to enjoy a 15-minute shower. A submariner is typically limited to just 60 seconds. It's one of the great ironies of life beneath the sea. Even while surrounded by an endless ocean, every single drop of fresh water is precious. Disposing of waste aboard a submarine is another enormous tactical challenge. The submarine operates under such tremendous water pressure that even a tiny opening can allow the ocean to rush inside like a violent flood, exactly as it did aboard U-1206. So how do submarines deal with everything from human waste to wastewater? Human waste is first collected inside a sanitary holding tank. Once that tank is full, extremely powerful pumps force the waste out into the ocean. These pumps generate pressure greater than the immense water pressure outside the submarine. During this process, the valves must be opened in an exact sequence. If the outer valve is opened before the inner one is properly secured, seawater can explode back into the submarine. That's precisely why operating a submarine's toilet requires specialized training. As for solid trash, it is compressed into dense packages, sealed inside steel containers, and in some cases, ejected from the submarine through specially designed disposal systems using torpedo tubes. Machines can handle most of the physical work. But what about the human mind? People often say that a submariner's greatest enemy is not the ocean, it's his own brain. Months without sunlight, almost no contact with family, the same smell every day, the same steel walls, the same familiar faces. Under those conditions, crew members can develop depression, anxiety, and claustrophobia. Even the smallest disagreement can quickly become a serious threat. That's why submarines carefully simulate the natural rhythm of day and night. During the day, the interior lighting mimics natural daylight. At night, the lights switch to red. It's a simple psychological signal that tells the brain it's time to rest. Even so, the crew must continue making life and death decisions under those same conditions. In October 1944, the submarine USS Tang fired a torpedo at an enemy target. But because of a tiny error in its calculations, the torpedo didn't continue toward its target. Instead, it circled back and struck the very submarine that had launched it. Whether it's the infamous toilet accident aboard U-1206 or USS Tang being destroyed by its own torpedo, these incidents reveal an important truth. The life of a submariner isn't just a battle against the enemy. Every single moment is a battle against his own mind, his own machines, and the silent ocean surrounding him, where the price of even the smallest mistake is nothing less than death. We hope you enjoyed this Nova Reports video and will support it by liking and sharing it with others. Thank you so much for your thoughtful and encouraging comments. We'll see you again in the next incredible video.